Hello there, welcome to Bo Beats. My name is Bo, and today we're checking out this little thing here. It's the MC101 from Roland. It's a smaller version of the MC707, portable, battery powered, and surprisingly a lot of fun. In today's video I'm gonna do a deep dive, taking you through how it works, what you can do with it, and play you some music demos. And in the end of this review I will actually answer questions about this device that I got from Instagram, instagram.com/bobeats. So let's have a listen. The MC101 is a smaller and portable version of the MC707, but it's also its own little thing because you end up using it quite differently because of its portability and small form factor. It has 128 note polyphony and 4 tracks compared to the 8 tracks of the MC707. But don't let the low track count fool you. One track, if it's set to drum, can have 16 individual sounds. And these sounds can be the PCM sounds that come with the unit, or it can be samples that you load into it. And for the second track type tone, you can play synth sounds. These are presets that you can load. And here's a little bit of a difference to the 707. The 707 comes equipped with a very in-depth synth engine. This one has a more downsized synth engine, so you can change a few of the parameters for each preset, but you can't create a sound from scratch. So that's a big difference. You have over 800 presets, so there's a lot to pick from, but you can't edit them to the same extent as on the 707. But as I said, you have 800 presets spanning from synth sounds even to pianos. And just like on the 707, you also have the looper. Now, the looper can only record from the USB, so you can actually stream audio through the USB into the looper or sample internally from one of the tracks. So you can, for example, send track number 1 to a looper on track number 4, or all of them, the entire mix output into a looper. So internal sampling, yes, but there's no audio input except for the USB. So keep that in mind. If you want a portable sampler that has a physical sample input, this is not it. So just to be clear and dispel any myth about the MC707 and 101, yes, you can load one-shot samples into a synth track, what's called a tone, and you can play them polyphonically. Basically using the synth engine to play the samples. So keep that in mind. You can't, however, stack samples or layer samples in any way. There's just one sample per track, unless you're using a drum track. And if you're using a drum track, you can of course have multiple samples running at once. However, then you don't have the chromatic view. And if we take a quick look at the connections, we have stereo out, we have MIDI in and out. We also have an SD card slot. And you can record audio over USB, so from your computer into this. And then we have the power on and off. And underneath we have this little latch here for the battery compartment. So 4 normal batteries. And on the front we have a mini jack for headphones. So let's do a brief overview. We have the volume, shift project, works just the same as the 707 projects. Open up the project menu here, where you can select the new, the settings, and so on. And also, a question I got a lot about the 707 is, can you transition from one project to another? And no, you can't, because when you load a project, that takes a bit of time. So you have to stop the sequencer and then load a project. It takes a bit of time to load it into the RAM. Basically, everything seems to be loaded into the RAM of this little unit or the working memory, and it's not streamed from the SD card itself. So then we have track select down here, and shift plus track opens up the track menu where you can select, for example, sound source, because this is interesting. So a really cool feature of the 707, and it's the same on the 101, is that you can select sound source to be either track or clip. If you're using the clip setting, it means that whatever sound setting you have is saved per clip. So when you change clip, you can also change the sound. This opens up the 4 tracks a lot. So you can have a bass on track number 2 and then change it to, say, a pad on another clip. A clip is like a pattern, basically. Then we have measure, where you can shift select to set step length, scale, direction, shuffle. So direction, for example, is you can play a pattern in reverse or forward, backwards, and so on. Then we have play record. Shift record opens up the quantize menu, where you have quantize either a global quantize, a per clip quantize, or quantized recording. So there's multiple settings there. Then we have multi-effects on and off, and shift plus multi-effects opens up the effects menu. So you have the same basic functionality as on the 707. You have the multi-effects. You can change it to, say, a chorus, distortion, looper effects, and so on. You have reverb, you have delay, you have compressor, and you have the master EQ. Worth to note is that you also have an EQ per clip as well. So that's very useful. Means you can really shape the sound on a track level, on a clip level, and you can change it also on the master level, which is very handy, and one reason why I think this is priced a little bit higher than some of the other grooveboxes. Then we have track volume, and then we have 4 controls, and these controls are for each of the tracks. So if I'm under sound here and I change something here, you can see coarse tuning changes for track 1, track 2, track 3, and 4. If I hold down sound and I change this, I can assign it. It's the same basic assignments on the 707, so I can assign to attack, decay, release, delay send, reverb send, and so on. You can also set it to controlling certain parameters of the synth engine. Okay, so basically we have 4 assignable controls per track. Then over here we can set the tempo. And then we have the pad modes. So we have clip mode, it's per track. Then we have the sequencer track, it's empty. So if I put down some steps here, you can see that the note I've selected in note mode. So this is on a drum track. So in note mode on a drum track, you have the individual samples for the drum track. So if I want to put down a snare, and then we have the scatter effects. And these are actually set up already with some presets, but you can go in and change each one of them. while we're talking about the pad mode, so let's go into the note mode here. We have the kick. Let's hold shift and press it. Now we can actually browse, so we can load a preset. Select another kick. Very simple. Or you could actually go in and load another wave file. So we can press another here, select wave file. What you saw me do there was live recording, just hit record, press play, and play whatever I want. In sequencer mode, we also have a sub-menu for each of the steps. So if I hit shift here and press this step, we get velocity, we get start, we get mute. Mute is basically a percentage chance to mute the step. So let's set that to 60, and we can add sub-steps and also a little flam. So let's do a sub-step. So you could hear that this step didn't play 100% of the time. Now, if I press another step, for example, this one or this one, you can see I'm just jumping around. This is very quick and easy, actually. This is a really cool way to just make changes per step. Now let's use the sample that I loaded earlier. Press shift, measure, we change the step length here to 64. And it's a little annoying, why don't you have a count in on these devices? Shift, quantize. Now let's set up some controls for track number 2. So I hold down sound here, and let's see, you can do vibrato depth maybe. Let's set it to cutoff, resonance, and I'm gonna set it to reverb send for the last one. So reverb send, let's send it to the reverb. Next up, I want to show you something really cool. If I hold shift and press mod here, we can actually go into the motion menu. As you can see, motion is on. So motion recording is recording automation for these knobs here and whatever we've set them up to do. So we can clear all, we can clear filter, we can clear mod, we can clear effects and clear sound. So clear the automations for these knobs per track. But we also have the motion designer. The motion designer basically sets up an automation curve automatically for whatever we set it up to do. So let's press motion designer. Let's select form type. So we have sine wave. You can also do square, arc, saw. So let's do sine. Step length 8. Minimum value 50. So let's decrease this a bit. And max value, let's decrease it a lot. And set it to sound. Do you remember what we set sound to? We set it to vibrato. So let's execute. So now we get this little vibrato thing going here on the second track here. Maybe it's a little extreme, so we can always just go back into motion designer and just decrease, say, the max value a bit and press execute, and it replaces the automation curve for this clip. Now, if we want to save the project, just hit shift and tempo for write. So select new project. I'm just gonna name it to something. Actually, the naming thing is a little bit annoying. It's not very quick and easy to use, but it works. Now let's go to track number 3. When you press an empty track, you can choose between tone, drum, drum plus compressor, or looper. So we're creating an empty tone track. So this is an initialized tone. And if we press here, we can select if we want a preset, we want to load from project, or if we want to load a WAV file. So let's go to preset. And here we have a bunch of different categories: synth bass, lead, pad, we have sequences, hits, synth effects, synth sounds, synth brass, bell pads, pianos. There's even, you know, pretty decent pianos. So here we have a synth sound. And now we can record automations. If I turn this knob, you can see that it's cut off. So let's record some automation. So since we're on a synth track, let's talk about what you can actually edit. So if we press Shift and Sound, we go to Tone Edit menu. Here you can select Settings for the synth sound and multi-effects. So we can add, for example, multi-effects here. So at the moment, it's switched on and we have a low boost. We can change that to a chorus or something later. But let's go back into the settings. Here you can see that for this synth sound, we have level, we have panning, delay send, reverb send, chorus tuning, fine tuning. You can set it to either mono or poly or tone. Tone basically means that it uses the default setting for the preset. Legato, bend range, portamento, portatime, cutoff, resonance, attack, decay, release, vibrato, rate, depth, and delay, as well as octave shift, velocity. You can also change how it allocates voices to the sound. You can also change bend mode, unison. So we can actually add unison to this sound. Not the most pleasant, no. And here we also have sys control 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as I showed you earlier, these correspond to these controls here. You can set up these controls to control these values here, and they differ per preset. So sometimes they do a lot, sometimes they do nothing. Pitch bend, and this is basically it. You don't have any deeper settings for the tones. So you have 800 plus presets spanning a wide range of sounds, but you can't go that deep in how much you change them. So that's good to know. So let's go into the multi-effects. These are basically insert effects per track or per clip if you have the sound settings set to clip, because then you can have different multi-effects per clip. So here we have multi-effects, and here you can see we have equalizer, EQs, we have isolator, but we also have phaser. And the fat Juno chorus with that noise to it. Here you can see we have the different modes for Juno chorus. We can also set the noise level. Dry and wet signal. And let's go back to track number 2 here, our little pad, and press sound, multi-effects, and add something. Step phaser, whoa, this sounds cool. I also want to address the fact that why I thought that there were a little bit too many shift commands and menu diving on the 707, some stuff that felt a little illogical. I think that they've taken the concept of the 707 and really downsized it into something which works. It's very quick. So for example, let me show you here. I'm going to record a drum pattern that I'm not going to be happy with. I'm just going to delete it. Okay, sounds like shit. Just hold. Delete it. Very quick. There's a lot hiding here. So if I hold on clip, I get 8 scenes. So if I want to save this as scene number 2 here, I just long press it. Now it's saved as scene number 2. So now we have scene number 1. Scene number 2. Which is very nice. And it's the same 8 scenes that you have on the 707. Now, one reason why I think it could be argued that it's worth the money is because you do have a lot of sound shaping tools, much more so than, say, on Innovation Circuit. For example, you have the master effects, you have individual track effects inserts, but you also have, if I go into shift and track here, you can see that we have EQ with low gain, set frequency, mid gain. You can even set the Q value, high gain, and so on. So let's touch on the master effects. As you've heard, we had the reverb going. I think I want to go into track number 2 here, and I'm just gonna go and set up into settings here. I'm gonna send something to the delay, as you can hear. So it's set to type delay. You can do different types. You also have the same chorus, Juno chorus. But let's stick with delay. I actually liked this one. Let's add some more feedback. And I'm starting to feel like I don't like the bass, so I'm pressing track number 3, preset, synth bass. There we go. Let's EQ track number 3. I want to remove some of that high. Now let's add a multi-effect on the master. So here you have multiple different types of master effects. So we could go for an EQ or a compressor and also more crazy stuff. think you get the idea. There's so much going on here, but I'm going to use one very subtle thing, or well, at least more subtle than these ones. I'm going to use the enhancer. So here's put out. Let's mix it in. I just think it makes it sound really good. And lastly, let's record onto a looper. So track 4, looper, complete. So to record into a looper, press the clip button, hold shift, press record. Here you can see we have different settings. So here we can set record source, mix out. We can change that to different tracks or PC, basically recording from the USB. How many measures? Let's say 4 measures. Let's press exit. Now let's press this pad here and press record. Now it starts blinking, means it's armed. Let's play. And now we have a clip. So this way you can sample individual tracks or simply sample from the USB or the entire mix output into one track stereo. Very handy. So let's answer a few questions here from Instagram. We have one here from Audrey. It seems quite fiddly. Is it big enough to properly perform using it? That's actually a really good question. I'm not a live performer, so I can only speak on it theoretically. What I've found is that the faders work fine. The knobs are maybe a little bit too close for some people. I have small hands and I still feel like I'm hitting the knobs. They don't budge though, because they have pretty decent resistance. But what I found that was a little bit difficult was maybe using the scatter effect while I'm transitioning between scenes. So I like to use scatter and transition into another scene. And because you switch the modes here, so you basically have the scenes beneath the clips button and scatter on its own page, it's very hard to use the scatter effects as transition effects. So keep that in mind. So not too small to be used effectively on stage, but there are a lot of shared real estate here on the unit. So keep that in mind, that you won't have access to everything as quickly as you do on the MC707. That answered the question. So I had a ton of questions. MC101 versus circuit. Anybody who's been following my channel for a long time knows that I have a special love for the circuit. Is pretty much the unit that started my channel, the synth that started the channel. And surprisingly enough, I think that this is a really good alternative to the circuit. This is one of the few small portable synths, grooveboxes that I really feel stack up well against the circuit as being kind of fast, hands-on, very much a couch kind of synth or groovebox. Very much something that you could take with you on the road. The form factor is even better than the circuit, is even smaller. I think maybe that the circuit is a little easier to perform on and create stuff on the fly. It has simply an easier time creating step sequences live, whereas this one has more performance effects. So you have the scatter effects, you have the master effects, and it's just easier to create cool transitions and cool effects live on the fly. So more performance effects, but harder to create improvised sequences on it, I think. In terms of synth engines, this one has the more powerful one. It sounds, I think, a little bit better, and it has a lot more different kinds of sounds, from pianos to bass to kind of acoustic sound, drum sounds, and so many more presets for that matter. However, the circuit has a much deeper synth engine. So it's an interesting trade-off. On this one, you have plenty of presets, you have a lot of drum sounds, you can load your samples and play them polyphonically, which you can't on the circuit. However, on the circuit, you have a synth engine that you can actually access all the parameters of, and it's also a very deep and very rich synth engine. So if that's something you really like, I think the circuit has one up there, but this one has much more sound on board, and also just having the SD card of course makes it much easier to expand with samples than the circuit that you have to actually plug into a computer and load stuff over. So more memory, more sounds, but less depth compared to the circuit. In terms of track count, the MC101 wins easily. It has 4 tracks, same as the circuit. However, 1 drum track, 16 sounds, much more polyphony. You can have synth sounds that change depending on clip, which is very, very handy. Yes, you do have similar functionality with the circuit, with the different kinds of sample locking that you can do and sound locking you can do. However, I just feel that the 101 is the kind of synth that you can just pick up. It's much easier to make a full track using it. So if that's something you really want to be able to make, the MC101 out of the box without learning advanced features, without fiddling around much with it, can do it very easily. Whereas the circuit is more limited in that regard when it comes to like making a full track, even though I've done it. So don't call me like a Roland chill or anything. Like, I've done it on the circuit. It's very possible, but I also know that it's more difficult than on the MC101. So if somebody's like a total beginner, the MC101 will be easier to create a full track on, that's for sure. Which brings me to another point, and that is that the MC101 simply has more depth in terms of sound shaping possibilities because of the EQs, the compressors, master effects, track EQs, and so on, track insert effect. So in terms of comparing it to the circuit, this is just much more powerful. Whether you like it or not, whether you need it or not, that's debatable, but it's definitely more powerful. Main differences between 101 and 707: track count, double on the 707. I'd say the synth engine is way, way, way deeper on the 707. And then we also have, of course, the sampling. This has kind of a limited sampling possibility, whereas the 707 can sample from its analog inputs. So is it easy to use compared to the larger 707? Yeah, funny enough, I think it is. I think it's very easy to use. Here we have a statement. It shouldn't replace circuit, but rather be a partner. I think that's a really good idea. Actually, this one together with a circuit makes a lot of sense. How, and this was a common question as well, how does it compare to the Deluge? The Deluge is just much, much, much more capable. It has a ton of more functions, but it also has a little bit more of a complicated workflow, I think, compared to the MC101. And I think comparing circuit, MC101 and Deluge is interesting because all three are small and portable, battery powered. So circuit is extremely hands-on, but has its limits. Whereas the MC101 actually has a bit more features with EQs, effects, and so on. However, the Deluge has a ton more features. So if you want more advanced sampling features, if you want, unlimited amount of patterns, pattern lengths, all that good stuff, that's on the Deluge and not on the MC101. So to me personally, it's about what kind of investment I'm willing to make, both monetary, but also like in time and energy, learning something. So the MC101 and circuit are very easy, small, easy to put in a bag, easy to just have fun with. Somebody asked me if it was like a lunch break kind of synth. And yeah, it's definitely a lunch break kind of synth. Whereas I feel the Deluge just has so much more capability, but it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants that. So I hope it makes sense. It's kind of hard answering these questions. How difficult, this is a good question actually. How difficult is that tiny screen to work with? It's not difficult at all, I'd say, because they've slimmed down the features in a way that makes sense. And I was actually surprised that it worked this well. And I hope the video shows that it's not super complicated. It's not super annoying. It's, it is what it is. You have to dive a bit, but they've actually made a really good feature, which is just that it sort of saves the state you were in. So if you go out from a menu and go back to the same menu, you're back to where you were. You're not at the start of the menu. You're back to the function you were actually tweaking. So that's good. It sort of saves that in memory. Can you actually make tracks on it? Yes, definitely. You can definitely make something which is more fully fledged. Sound design capabilities, well, it's not really there, is it? Like, it's quite limited. It's more closer to something like a circuit than it is something like a Deluge, I feel. And to be clear, the circuit has 8 macro controls that you set up per preset, so you can't change them from the synth itself. And the MC101 has a ton more presets, but you have fewer options to change them. So I think it sort of balances itself out a bit depending on what you need. If you need versatility in terms of what kind of sounds you have, the MC101 has it. If you want a little bit more, ability to tweak the sounds, the circuit has, one up there. But if you really want to have a synth engine on a groovebox that you can tweak down to its fundamental levels, then the MC707 or Deluge is something you could look at, or maybe MPC Live. I haven't tested it, but people say good things about it. Is it worth the price tag? this is of course the big questions. Are Roland products overpriced? So if the circuit was, I don't know, 350 euros when I bought it, and this is 500, I'd say it's pushing the limit for what I think is acceptable in terms of price, but you have to acknowledge the fact that there's just so much more functionality in this device compared to the circuit. That doesn't mean that the circuit is worse. It just means that you're paying for all these effects, different effect engines, a ton of sounds, a lot more internal memory, SD card slot, sampling capabilities. So keep that in mind when you're discussing the price, that it might seem a little expensive. I can sort of agree. Maybe it should be 450, but it's just a lot more features than you get on a circuit. How does it stack up against the Digitact? Now, I think the Digitact is something totally different. It's a creative sampler, and this is a little groovebox with a synth engine and a sample engine, but you don't use them the same way. Definitely, it's very different devices. So those were some questions. Now, in a review, I'm supposed to say pros and cons. I think I've gone over a lot of what works well. I think in terms of cons, I think the lack of a deep synth engine is a big con. I just wish that they've added more depth to the synth engine. That would have made it even better. Another downside that I touched upon is the fact that, for example, scene transitions, you have to hold clip to access that menu. It's a little annoying when you want to create cool transition effects, for example. So the smaller form factor is really cool, really good. However, some stuff is hidden beneath other buttons. So keep that in mind if you're aiming to use it for a live performance situation. And I must say that I'm not a fan of the plastic. It's a fingerprint magnet, and it doesn't feel all that, it doesn't feel all that high quality. I mean, I think it feels equivalent to the circuit, I guess, but I don't think it'll break, but it just doesn't feel super high quality, and neither does the MC707. However, it sits very well on a table with the little rubber feet, so that's a plus. And last thing is that this little keyboard here is not super nice to play. The same goes for the MC707, that the pads are responsive enough and so on, but it's just hard to get a good feel for it. So I would actually prefer to use it with a MIDI keyboard. So keep that in mind if it's something that's very important to you. So this was my review of the MC101. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, if it's something you're interested in or if not. And you can always leave suggestions of alternatives and why you think something could be a good alternative. People are always interested in that, and I think it's good sharing the knowledge. If you're a big fan of my reviews, go to patreon.com/bowbeats and support. It helps me keep my independence intact because I know I'll have money coming in that way, and it helps me create more and better reviews. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.